CoCo Dining in Ho Chi Minh City is one of only a handful of Michelin-starred restaurants in Saigon. The establishment serves a luxurious 11-course tasting menu that weaves together a contemporary take on Vietnamese cuisine combined with immersive storytelling. The restaurant may not only be the best in Ho Chi Minh City, but all of Vietnam, so I just had to give it a try.
Today, I am clearly not in Vietnam, but rather Astoria Park in New York City. The thing is, I never had the chance to film an introduction and conclusion to my experience at CoCo Dining, and it was quite the experience. So before my trip to Vietnam, I knew I wanted to go to a few Michelin-starred restaurants, and the Michelin Guide in that country is rather new. It was introduced in 2023, and at the time, only 4 restaurants achieved a Michelin star, but since then, that number has more than doubled. Most of the starred restaurants are either in Ho Chi Minh or Hanoi, 2 of Vietnam's most populated cities. Since I'd be traveling to both of those locations, I wanted to do at least one starred restaurant in each of those cities. For Ho Chi Minh, there were a handful of options and they all sounded pretty good. If I had the time, I would have gone to all of them. I ended up choosing CoCo Dining for a few reasons actually. One, their menu sounded great. It offered a lot of courses and it was pretty easy to make a reservation there. Plus, the location was very convenient. As a result, a few days into my trip in Ho Chi Minh, I went to CoCo Dining for dinner and had one hell of a meal. So with that being said, this was my experience at CoCo Dining.
CoCo Dining is centrally located in Ho Chi Minh City, within District 3. It's near such landmarks as the War Remnants Museum and the Independence Palace. It was in 2021 that CoCo Dining opened its doors, but in fact the establishment is only one part of the multi-concept compound known as CoCo Saigon, which also includes venues like CoCo Bar and CoCo Grill. All of the concepts are the product of Chef Vo Thanh Vuong, who was the 2019 winner of Top Chef Vietnam. Over the years, CoCo Dining brought in a number of awards and accolades, but it was in 2025 that the restaurant was awarded their Michelin star. Without question, I was incredibly excited for my dinner at CoCo Dining, so I arrived to the restaurant at 5:30 p.m. for my reservation. After checking in, I was seated not in the dining room, but in the establishment's bar. It was there where I was given a towel to cleanse my hands, a glass of water, as well as an explanation of how my dinner would unfold, which would prove to be a journey in more ways than one. The menu at CoCo Dining changes every 6 to 8 months, and I was about to enjoy a menu centered around Chef Vuong's memories and culinary experiences that are expressed through dishes representing various regions of Vietnam. With my ticket in hand, I was ready to embark on my own culinary adventure. So I was brought to the dining room and seated at the chef's counter. I thought that CoCo Dining was beautifully designed. It was modern and elegant, but still had a nice sense of warmth to it. To put it simply, it would prove to be a fine spot for a meal. Once I was situated, I was given the menu, which was crafted in the fashion of a map. While everyone would be enjoying the same tasting menu, the drinks are another matter. Besides water, I wanted to get one of the pairings, and there were 4 options. I decided to go with the Explorer pairing, which featured a mix of drinks that included beverages like wine, sake, and cocktails. Soon after ordering, I was presented with the first beverage of the pairing, a glass of Charles Mignon Premium Reserve Brut Champagne. That proved to be an enjoyable champagne indeed. It was fruity, vibrant, and was overall a refreshing start to my dinner. At around the same time, I received the opening course, which focused on eel, and it was presented in 3 different ways. The first was an eel tart, which was a simply wonderful bite to kick everything off. I next tried the smoked eel, which was perfectly cooked and proved to be my favorite preparation of eel in that course. Finally, I tried the eel soup, which was soothing and comforting. So far, my dinner was off to a great start. With each new course, I was given a beautifully designed card that would introduce the dish as well as continue the story of the meal. It was a nice touch and turned the dinner into a more immersive experience, which I really appreciated. Next up was a gorgeously plated basil sorbet with a variety of fresh and colorful herbs. The sorbet was on the mark, but the herbs added even more vibrancy to the dish, which was once again another winner. After finishing, it was time for the next beverage in the pairing, which was a sake. It was definitely on the lower side in terms of alcohol content, coming in at only 8%, but it packed some seriously strong flavor that I really enjoyed. The next course centered on chicken, which featured two separate creations. The first was a sort of chicken sausage topped with caviar. It was spectacular. In that singular savory ball was the whole essence of a chicken. So far, that was probably the best bite of the meal, but its accompaniment was no slouch either. It was basically some well-seasoned rice, but it was done so well, equating to a comforting and satisfying pairing to the chicken. Next, I was presented with a course that was a reinterpretation of the famous grilled pork sausages of Quignon. Based upon the card I received, I was not expecting the course to look like it did. Instead of grilled pork, the dish consisted of scallops, jelly, and some artfully arranged flowers. I found the creation to be delicious as it was filled with pleasurable notes of the sea. I also appreciated its smooth texture, although I'm still not sure how it related to grilled pork sausages, I nevertheless still enjoyed it. After finishing, it was time for my next drink. The beverage was a Vietnamese rice-based spirit produced by the Village Chateau Distillery. It was poured over a glass of ice and served with a slice of lemon. I really enjoyed that drink. It had a well-balanced and interesting taste of red dragon fruit. In fact, it was one of my favorite beverages of the pairing. Next, I received a course that focused on fish sauce. Now, I can't recall as to the type of fish that I was served, but it was cooked perfectly, and it was nicely enhanced by the rich, funky, and flavorful sauce that it was paired with. Alongside the plate was a fascinating looking cracker in the shape of a fish skeleton, which proved to be an enjoyable bite. After finishing, I was on to the next course, which focused on grapes. Once again, the course contained multiple creations. The first was a single bite, which if I recall correctly, contained some sort of grape juice. The result was an absolute explosion of flavor. And when I say explosion, I mean literal explosion. If my lips weren't closed, that would have resulted in a mess. Now those grapes the bite was resting on weren't just for show. In fact, I was encouraged to give them a try as well. Regarding the main focus of the course was a creation that on quick glance looked kind of like a dessert, but it was nothing of the sort. The dish consisted of king crab, caviar, wasabi, and grape nectar. Now that was an interesting plate. The crab had some nice freshness to it, the caviar had good savoriness, while the grape nectar provided a nice sweet contrast. Once again, I was very pleased with that course. Next was another beverage in the pairing, and for the life of me, I can't remember exactly what it was. I'm pretty sure it was a cocktail of some sort, and I think I liked it, but I'm not sure. The courses and drinks came out fairly quickly, and it was hard to keep up. Nevertheless, I was really enjoying myself. Soon enough, I was presented with the next course, and it was all about spice. The plate centered on Chef Vuong's memories of sour fish soup with fish sauce, fresh chili, and young tamarind. That was a great plate of food. Once again, the fish was perfectly cooked. It was soft and flaky, but the bold flavors complementing the fish were wonderful. For the next course, I first had to choose a pair of chopsticks from a beautiful selection, and then I was presented with not only an interesting dish, but a fun one. It was basically an elevated take off of an instant noodle soup featuring prawns. I first tried the broth, which was spectacular. It was vibrant and had a little spice. Then I realized I forgot to squeeze the lime over the soup, so I went to it and then I really dove in. That course was excellent. Now, it may have been one of the simplest things I was served that night, but it ended up being one of my favorite dishes. Plus, a piano player began to play while I was eating, which further enhanced the already great atmosphere and experience I was having. At that moment, a wave of happiness hit me. I felt so grateful to be traveling and eating such fantastic food. I think it was that beautiful live music that really brought out those feelings within me. Plus, the alcohol I was consuming probably played a part in that as well. Those were some generous pours. Next up wasn't an official course, but rather a quick, cool, pleasant palate-cleansing bite, which certainly did its job. Then it was time for another beverage, which was honey beer, and I really liked it. Now, I'm typically not a fan of beer that's sweetened or has flavor additives, but that was a fine beverage as the honey flavor and sweetness was well balanced. Finally, it was time for the last savory course, but really it was more so a collection of a number of dishes. On the menu, it's labeled as a family feast, which I believe is an appropriate name indeed. I first tried the tart, and it looked like a beautiful miniature basket of flowers, and it was delightful. I then utilized the empty bowl to transfer some of the rice I was given, which is actually the focus of the course. There were two kinds of rice, and one of them was blood dragon rice. As expected, the rice was perfectly cooked, and it proved to be a nice side to enjoy alongside the two proteins that I was presented with. Both of the meats were nicely prepared, and I really enjoyed the Wagyu beef, which had so much flavor to it. As a sort of palate cleanser, there was a small dish of pickled elements, which were pleasant. Finally, there was the soup, which was a joy to eat as well. Overall, that course really was a great collection of flavors and textures that were both refined and yet comforting. After finishing, I was presented with a towel to cleanse my hands as I transitioned to dessert. First, I was presented with, sadly, the last beverage of the pairing, which was a Novel Fine Tawny Port. The wine was strong and deep, with nice notes of raspberries and cherries. I really liked it. Then I received my initial dessert, which consisted of multiple creations. The focus was sapodilla, and that is something that I didn't know exactly what it was until my meal at CoCo Dining. It's a fruit that may be native to Central America, but it certainly has a place in various Southeast Asian cuisines. That creation cracked open nicely to reveal a delicious and creamy center that had notes of brown sugar and the like. On the side was a scoop of ice cream, which proved to be a perfect pairing. Finally, it was time for the last course, but that meant a change of scenery, and I was taken back to the bar where my journey at CoCo Dining all started. I was given 3 colorful pedophores, which featured flavors like sugarcane, guava, and hog plum. Each of those bites were a joy. Overall, I had a great time at CoCo Dining. The food was not only delicious, but I felt that I was immersed within a story, one in which I reflected on my own memories and created new ones. My meal, however, wasn't quite over yet, as hidden within the display of the pedophores was a surprise. Inside a case was a sort of chip that was meant to scratch off a section on the back of my menu, which revealed a QR code. Upon scanning the code, I was taken to a digital display of all the cards I was presented with throughout my dinner, complete with some creative illustrations. In addition, I was told that if I returned to CoCo Dining for another meal with that chip, I would get a surprise. Looks like I'll have to plan another trip to Vietnam. Finally, I was presented with the bill, which totaled to a bit over 6.5 million dong. With the conversion rate of that specific day, I spent a total of $253.46.
So that meal was special. I loved it. That was not only the best meal of my trip in Vietnam, it was also one of the best meals I've had so far this year. Now, the food was fantastic, but it was really the combination of the food, the atmosphere, the incredible service and storytelling that made CoCo Dining unique and special. Plus, it was pretty fun getting that beverage pairing. Now, that's something I normally don't get to do here just because of how expensive alcohol prices are in the US. And those were some fine beverages. Plus, I love the fact that the restaurant had 4 different pairings at 4 different price points, which made it more accessible to everyone. Another thing that I really appreciated about CoCo Dining was just having elevated Vietnamese food. Now, here I've had plenty of Vietnamese food, all the standards, pho, banh mi, etc. But fine dining Vietnamese, that's not something that I've really had. It's exciting to see a cuisine like that, a cuisine that I love, being taken to another level. Even here in New York, Vietnamese is getting the fine dining treatment. In fact, there's a Vietnamese establishment in Brooklyn called Maison Sun, and they serve a tasting menu. And in fact, I feel like they've got potential for a Michelin star. Anyways, back to CoCo Dining. That really was more than just a meal. It was an experience. And it's so impressive that the restaurant completely changes their menu every 6 to 8 months. I'm certainly eager to see what the restaurant will do in the future, but for now, I'm content with the memories I made there on my visit. To sum things up, I had a spectacular meal and experience at CoCo Dining. It is without a doubt one of the best restaurants in Vietnam, and I hope to one day return.